Probably because they're embarrassed about Golang, or I don't know.
Hey, good morning. So we're live now. Or good afternoon.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. If you're watching this in the US, and good later in the day if you're watching this in EMEA. So today, Jeremy and I are going to talk a little bit about Microprofile, OpenTelemetry, some things like that. But first, we'd like to, understand what is Microprofile and why are we even talking about it in the first place. So cue Jeremy and the one slide that we have today. The rest will be code.
We have 2 slides.
Oh, we do.
All right, can you guys see that?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, go to the next one that actually has some meaning.
Yeah.
All right. So what is Microprofile, and why is it important? So for those of us that grew up in the Java EE space, we had a bunch of extra functionality that we wanted to look at, and Microprofile has a long history. It came along, just actually a few years back, but I'm playing with my screen here. So Microprofile started off way back, I think, in 2017. And we added a bunch of things like config to it. We added some things that we needed that we were importing from other libraries like Netflix OSS, Zipkin, and other things. We wanted some telemetry, some configuration-based stuff. So as Microprofile grew up through like 2018, 2019, we examine that with, adding capabilities for like JSON-B and other stuff. And then we decided to bring all that together. And then there was going to be some standalone things like LRA and GraphQL. So with this functionality, we can pretty much allow us to annotate our code pretty quickly for things like fault tolerance and capturing metrics with Prometheus, or doing a tracing with and capturing it through Jaeger. And then as the standards like Open Tracing and Open Consensus kind of combined, then we created OpenTelemetry and combined that all, but it's still backward compatible. So if I'm in an environment like JBoss EAP, I can leverage OpenTelemetry with my existing code, but I can also use that same standard and same coding skills if I'm in Quarkus, right? So we can pretty much very easily add some extensions to our code and then grab a bunch of functionality. And that's what we're going to talk about today, and why we would want to do that. So what's the other slide, Jeremy?
What's our next slide? Oh, thank you. Okay, that's our last. So yeah, we can forget about slides now. So yeah, we're going to look at a few different things. I've got an application running. I think I have it running. No, I don't have it running. So built a little application here. So has anybody else seen, so I saw Mission Impossible Tuesday night. My daughter is a huge Mission Impossible fan.
Mm-hmm.
And so we went to see the movie Tuesday night. In case anybody else has not seen it, I guess it officially opens like tomorrow, I think. So anyway, if you're a fan of the Mission Impossible movies, I built a little Mission Impossible app. So localhost 88, we're now running, and we have an API here. We can get a list of all of the Mission Impossible movies. We've got Postman running here too, so we can see this in Postman as well. We can get all the Mission Impossible movies. We can get a random Mission Impossible movies. So we can say random Mission Impossible movie. Dead Reckoning Part 1. So that's the one I saw this week. It's pretty good. Being in technology, if you ever see movies where people like hack into things, or we have computers as the bad guys, sometimes it gets a little goofy, but this one's pretty enjoyable. So we can do that. We can check out another one. Whoops, not dictation. So Mission Impossible 3, we're just getting a random movie here. In addition to movies, we have IMF agents, right? So those are the IMF. We're missing a particular IMF agent here, right? But we have some of the supporting IMF agents here. We get a random IMF agent. So we get a random IMF agent. Uh-oh, we get an error there. We'll have to address that in a minute. And we've got some quotes from the movie. So we got some of the best quotes. So if I let you know where I'm going, I won't be on holiday, right? Or I would have thought the hardest part was serving that pressing need of yours to get your gun off. Just stay alive. I'm not going to lose you. So we've got some of the best quotes. Mission accomplished. That's a good one, right? So we've got this this application here. We've got some post. Again, we have Postman. We can exercise this through Postman. We can use it through our browser. And so we will go through here and add in some stuff. So what's the first thing we want to look at?
So why don't real quick before we do that, there's some tenants to the microprofile stuff. Core tenants that the community has established, like, it's open source, vendor neutral, community engagement and collaboration. But from our perspective, we're adding, the working group has some additional core tenants like limited processes. So allowing us to experiment and innovate, doing an implementation first kind of thing, and a low barrier to entry. So taking those things in mind as core tenants to actually use in Microprofile. Maybe, Jeremy, let's add some tracing first in OpenTelemetry.
Sure. Oh, and then one thing you'll notice, you'll see this word SmallRye. So SmallRye is a community project, right? Or it's an umbrella project for some other projects that feed into Quarkus, including all of the Microprofile stuff. So you see config, Java Web Token, health, fault tolerance, metrics. We're going to look at a few of these things. Open tracing has been deprecated in favor of OpenTelemetry, right? But so a lot of the SmallRye is kind of the umbrella project that we'll use. So let's come over here. Let's stop that, right? Now with Quarkus, I'm running Quarkus. This is the Quarkus CLI. And so what I'm going to say is Quarkus extension add. And what am I going to add first?
You're going to add OpenTelemetry because that's the first one we're going to do. Now, taking those tenants, core tenants that I just spoke about, like limited processes, being able to experiment and innovate really quickly, and a low barrier to entry. That's the only thing we did so far was simply add OpenTelemetry through adding an extension. And that command line that he just did simply adds that to our POM file.
And I am going to do one kind of cheat here. So I am going to I've already got the comments, the configuration that I need sitting in this application, and I'm just going to uncomment them now. So what I'm doing is I'm giving this a name. So we can say,
you want to expand your text a little bit? There you go.
Yeah. So I'm going to give this a name here, the mission observability service. And then the endpoint for exporting traces, and then just, all right. So, and then by the way, I'm also running Docker Compose over here. So this is just my Docker Compose machine. If you want to see what I've got running, I've got this mission observability, and I'm running Prometheus and Jaeger. So those are both running, waiting to start collecting metrics. All right, so let's start Quarkus back up. And so we're booting up. We're running dev services, so Quarkus and dev services, right? It notices that I'm running Docker. It spins up all the containers I need. It's created our database, right? So it's created the database stuff. And then it's got installed features, and one of them is OpenTelemetry right there. So we've got OpenTelemetry running. So let's see what we want to do first with OpenTelemetry. Go to Jaeger here. Whoops. And let's, so Jaeger has already discovered our mission observability service, right? And the only URL it found is the Quarkus dev UI. If you haven't seen the Quarkus dev UI before, by the way, the dev UI is here. And so the dev UI shows us all the stuff that we've got going, databases, hybrid ORM, all the various stuff we have, right? Including OpenTelemetry, right? So we're using OpenTelemetry to trace the services. So Jaeger's already found, there's Jaeger. Jaeger's already found that one. Well, let's come and do some stuff here. Let's say, get some random quotes here. by fire. That's the best way, really. Desperate times, desperate measures. Now let's see if we an operation. We do have an operation now, right? Quotes random. So let's find some traces for that, right? So first of all, what's a trace? What am I looking at here?
All right. So if we're looking at a trace and a span, what we're looking at is we made the call and we want to look at the timing of the call. You'll notice that we didn't actually add anything to the code yet. So simply adding the OpenTelemetry and having the Jaeger collector up and running allows us to collect these traces and spans. So we're going to get some timing from that. We're going to get, the endpoint that got called from that. We're going to get the status codes that got called from that, whether it was successful or not. We're going to build on this so that we can understand the business process flow through this. Some things that might be relevant, when you want to use this, first and foremost, if you use this in production, there's going to be a performance impact. All right. So there's the ability for us to create collectors that we can put into our own collectors. So we could create a collector that is a sidecar and have it turned off in production and then turn it on when there's a problem. Or we can do just turn tracing on, say Jeremy was the last person to code anything on this, and we have a new developer that comes on and Jeremy didn't document anything. But if we had tracing in here turned on and that capability, then I could say to the new developer, go through the code and hit some of the business process endpoints and observe all the components that are involved in that. So one of the things that we're going to observe, we're going to add the capability to look at the database.
Let's go back to that, yeah. So let's come back to Quarkus here. We're going to enable.
There you go.
Telemetry.
And so you'll notice we haven't really done much so far except added the extension. Yeah, got to restart. We added the extension and then we just enabled a couple properties so far. So we haven't added anything really to our code yet.
Yeah.
And of course, certain things don't work when you're doing the demo. Yeah, you got to add the OpenTelemetry -JDBC. Perfect.
OpenTelemetry
-JDBC.
All right, let me cheat.
Are you spelling telemetry now?
Let me cheat.
Yeah, open the POM file.
Oh, this is why. Okay, this is not actually a Quarkus extension that we're adding. It's just an OpenTelemetry.
Yeah, there you go.
So that's why it is not adding. So, all right, got that.
When we talk about telemetry too, let's put it in perspective of OpenTelemetry so that we can understand what we're talking about from an industry perspective. OpenTelemetry is what we're using as the definition, and when we talk about OpenTelemetry, really we're trying to define working with traces, metrics, and logs, right? So those are the things we're really going to talk about relevant to Microprofile and OpenTelemetry today.
So now this time, if you notice, we have 3 spans, right? So our previous version I was calling random quotes, which I still got the quotes in the database, right?
Yeah.
So say the quotes, we just had 1 span because it was just using our get, right? Now I've got movies random, find the traces for that. We got 3 spans here. So let's take a look at our 3 spans. We have our overall span, right? And then we have a data source get connection, and then we have the select. So we can drill in and see how long it takes us to get our connection, right? Not and we can see how long it takes to run the select. And we even, which is really nice, we even get the database statement, right? So we can see what we're selecting.
So this is really great, but what if I wanted to name something so I could actually trace it by name? and then I could search on it by name. So I know this is all going into a Jaeger collector, but if I wanted to push this into something else where I was collecting that information and I wanted to trace it by name, we could go to our code and we can add something, a simple annotation with span.
Yep, you need to tell IntelliJ to reload the POM file. There we go. And what do I put here? The value equals.
No, just put it in brick quotes. No value equals. There you go.
All right. Go back to our quote random. Say movies random. Okay, movies random. Random movie span. We got a name there.
Cool. So now if this is getting published to some other collector, and we wanted to correlate this with, say, some metrics or some logs that we're going to look at later, I could now do some correlation in the background that said, with the random movie span, I'm seeing some timing things, and I want to collect maybe some metrics, and maybe there's some logs that are associated with this.
All right, so that takes us through basic spans. To recap really quickly, what we did here was added into our POM. I used the CLI. You can also do this, manually. You can do it when you generate your application. Quarkus OpenTelemetry, and then we had to manually add one extra one, which is just this OpenTelemetry JDBC library, right? And so that gives us the ability to trace our calls. We didn't have to do anything to start getting data, but we add this with span here, and now we can get the name of that, right? All right, so what do we want to do? What do we want to look at next? That gives us some basic insight. What about actually taking care of our application, right? So maybe some small RI stuff.
Yeah, let's add some small RI health stuff.
Okay, health check.
When our application starts up, we want to get it out of the way. Is it alive? Is it running? So the thing that we would want to do also, if we're going to deploy this into Kubernetes eventually, and not just a container, we want to be able to hook into the Kubernetes. Is it alive? Liveliness checks and readiness checks.
All right, small RI health has been installed. So if we've got our POM, we should find, there we go, right below what we were looking at previously. We have small RI health has been added to our POM file, right? So what do we want to do first? Now, actually, if we just start it up, we'll get some value, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's boot up Quarkus here. And this URL that we didn't have going a minute ago. But we already got one health check. We got two health checks, right?
Yep. Just by adding the extension, we got the capability to say, is it up and running? So this is pretty neat because we didn't really have to do anything. It's really simple. Quarkus did a lot of the work for us, and Microprofile, the implementation of Microprofile behind that.
Yeah, and what's really nice that it did about this is it knows that we have a database and a data source, and so it's already checked that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is really nice. And the health UI database health.
So let's but now that we know it's up or down, we can actually put some logic in there about whether or not it's up or down based on something that is going on in the background. And we can also add a liveliness check too, right, Jeremy?
We want to do liveness?
Sure.
What do we want to call this? Let's call it application liveness. That makes more sense, right?
So the difference between liveliness and the difference between liveliness and readiness is simply, when they're in a container, and if we were in, say, Kubernetes, if we were failing a liveliness check, we might have it restart the container. Whereas if we were failing like a readiness check, we'd probably stop the application from serving up any traffic at all.
We need to implement health check, right?
Yep.
And we're going to say, so we're going to return a health check response. So let's say our liveness check right now is going to turn health check down. So it's application down, right? So that one's not good. And if we want to see this, we can say application down. So I have a check that says application down. Not very good. So what I want to do here, and this is an application scope CDI bean. So let's put in some things in here like we would expect. We can also, let's say we can inject. I'm using the repository pattern for all this. So I can say movie repository and inject. What do we have? We have a quotes repository. What's the other one I have? I have IMF agents, right? IMF agent. In fact, this is not the International Monetary Fund. If you are not a Mission Impossible fan, the IMF in this case refers to the Impossible Mission Force, which is our hero's employer. Okay. And then what I want to do here is I want to verify that I'll actually make a call. So I'll say if, and let's say movie repository list all, and this is Hibernate Panache. I think we've covered this before, but if you haven't seen Hibernate Panache, super nice. The repository pattern, let me just hop in here really quickly. Repository pattern implements a Panache repository for the entity. If you want to see the entity movie, this is just our movie entity. And I get all these kind of all this kind of stuff for free, and then I've added in a random movie method myself. But I'm just going to use ListAll, which is just one of tons of methods I get for free. So I'll say ListAll, or actually I think I can do count. Yeah, I can do count of anyway. So ListAll size greater than or equal to 1, and quote repository ListAll size greater than or equal to 1. This isn't like the cleanest looking code, right? But
Jeremy likes the whole domain-driven design thing, so he does the repository pattern. I'm pretty simple, so I do the active record thing.
And if these are, this is pretty basic, right? But basically, if I have stuff in my database and it's returning, I'm going to say turn health check response up. All right.
Yeah, maybe you want to make the code a little bigger. Somebody's having a little difficulty seeing the code.
Oh, okay. How's that?
Great.
Should we turn our faces off for this, or do you guys you have to look at us too?
Yeah, I'll turn mine off.
So I'll show you. So what we have here is I have this class called application liveness. I've annotated it with this liveness probe, which is hailing Quarkus. This is a liveness probe. We're going to use this as part of our health checks. It's application scope, meaning it's a CDI bean. I have access to all the CDI bean stuff that I normally would, which is how I'm throwing a logger in here. And I'm injecting other resources. I'm injecting my repositories, and I'll jump back into here in case you didn't see this. So this movie repository, this is the repository pattern. It's a Panache repository. If you haven't seen Hibernate Panache before, it's super cool. Makes life really nice. This is a Panache entity, which is you just extend Panache entity. You get a lot of stuff for free with Panache. So I've added a method called random movie, but there's all kinds of methods that come for free. One of those methods that come for free is to list all. So I'm calling list all. It's going to get all the movies out of the database. I mentioned this is this bean is managed by Quarkus, right? It is a CDI bean, so I can also do things like saying transactional, which means I can talk to a database. So that should be running right now. Let's see. That all looks pretty good. So actually you're saying reporting health status application down, right? Because that reported down while I was initially coding that. So let's take a look now and see what it says. All right, application is live because it can query the database. So it's running those databases and querying that. We can actually throw in a log too. So debug database checks passed, right? So if we look here, and we're logging from here too. All right, so that's our liveness and health checks for small Horizon liveness.
Yeah, you can add the readiness thing to. There's a readiness annotation too.
Yep. So we can do a readiness. We could have done this as a readiness
Right.
too.
Right. Yep.
Adding this, they're kind of the same things, right? Well, they're not the same things, but yeah, I could have done this as readiness too. So let's do. Functionality is pretty similar. So
functionality is pretty similar. The behavior that you're trying to engender is a little different. So
yeah,
because if a readiness check fails, we really want to stop traffic going to that versus restarting the container possibly.
All right, so that's a readiness check. All right, what do we want to look at next?
Well, now that we know the thing is up and running, we did some health. We can trace the actual flow through it. There's some additional functionality like fault tolerance that we want to add. So what happens if we fail, right? What happens?
Let's say, come back here. Didn't we had a little error earlier, right?
Yeah, we did. Yeah. I don't know if that was by design because this is a demo, but yep, here you go.
They're getting some errors in there. All right, so let's see. Why do we have this error? Like, we're going to need to see why we have these kind
of. And what kind of exception was that? That was a runtime exception?
Let's see what it was. Yeah, it was a runtime exception. Service failed. Random agent. IMF agent repository Java line 9. Let's see what we have here. So Java line 29, some idiot wrote some potential failure code in here, right?
Yeah.
So what we're doing, we've got an atomic log. This is also based on Quarkus examples. So we just have an invocation number, right? And if the modulus of 4 is greater than 1, we fail it, right? If not, then we're going to be successful. We were logging this failing in the logs. So if we look at this in the logs, let's come back and do a few of these. We'll look at it through here. Is it random IMF agent? So in our logs, HTTP request failing with 15, right? 15 modulus 4 is greater than or equal to 1. 16 is not, it's good. 17, 18, there we go. Failing with 18, right? So here's what. So we need to deal with this, right? So how are we going to deal with this?
Well, let's try and retry it so that we can. Let's put a retry on there and see what happens when we catch that exception.
All right.
So go to the method.
So right here,
first we're going to have to add an extension, right?
Oh, that's right. We do.
Oh yeah, yeah. So we have a really easy extension to add. It's just a small right -fault -tolerance.
Okay.
And again, all this did was add that to the POM file.
Yep, right there. Right, can you guys see that?
Yep.
Also, let me just make sure IntelliJ knows that we have updated the POM file. Okay.
And now let's go to your method, and we want to handle this, and we'll just handle it at first by putting a retry on it. So it doesn't seem, terribly malicious. So we'll say retry on equals, and that was a runtime exception. So we'll do runtime exception.class. No, and not in quotes. Yep, perfect, comma, and then we'll do a couple of retries. So we'll say max retries equals 3 because that's the default, right? But we'll just graphically demonstrate it here. and then another comma, and then we'll say, let's delay it for some time period. So 150 is short enough because it's a pretty quick call and you're on a Mac and it's really fast, right? So what we're going to do here, just to recap that, was we're going to, every time it throws that runtime exception, we're going to retry it, and then we're going to have a little delay added to it. So if you go back and restart it.
Oh, yeah, let's start the server.
Yep.
Fire Quarkus back up. And we should see that we have a new plugin here too. We have smaller eye context, smaller eye fault tolerance right there.
Yep.
All right, let's random IMF agents. So actually, let's okay. You guys notice a little bit of a pause right there?
Yep.
So I think
what we're not seeing is we're not seeing the exception, right? So what's going on is it hit the exception, it stopped for a little bit, and then it retried the call. And look at that. Yep.
We notice, we see it's telling us it fails, right? And then it returns some, then it returns random, and then it failed. But that's okay because it just gets called again, right? So no info. We see our errors right there, right? Returning. So we're experiencing errors, but it's okay, right? Because we're catching that.
You know, I almost want to make a comment about, did we just throw all the exceptions away?
We did just throw them.
Yeah, we did. But you know what? We're going to catch those a little bit when we talk about examining the logs. So we'll come back to that.
This is also too, like, one thing I probably would not actually recommend doing this through like we're inline, right? So this is the same application. We're making an inline memory call. Typically, I would do this if I was calling out to some kind of external service, right?
Yep.
You know, so if I was making a REST call. So I probably should have written this example to make a REST call.
So, and just to recap on some of the core principles from the Microprofile community. So far, we really limited, you know, the amount of process that we've had to introduce here. We're able to experiment pretty quickly because you've already guessed that, you know, Jeremy and I just do stuff on the fly, and you know, the barrier to entry is pretty low here, right? We didn't do anything much except add some stuff to the POM, maybe enable a couple properties, and then put an annotation on there. There are more complex things that we can do with OpenTelemetry and stuff in Microprofile by adding that into our code and creating spans and gauges and other things. We didn't want to get deep into that today, but we just wanted to show you how to get up and running pretty easily. So
in a later episode, we can do that. If
yeah, we could do you know, some really deep dive on the whole span and tracing thing with that could, you know, sampling and other things like that. We could deep dive on some of the stuff, you know, what happens when you propagate that information and, you know, put it in a time series database and make it really huge. But for now, we just want you to get started easily. So one of the next things we want to do is, if we hit that exception and we have a problem, can we create something like a fallback method? Oh, really cool. You already had it up and running. So we say, actually do fallback method equals, and then that name.
Oops. Thank you. All right. So now if we notice, conveniently, I have a fallback method right here. And I will return a new IMF agent with Ethan Hunt here, right? He's our default hero. So now I have a fallback method. So let's check this out, see how this looks. Let's say,
so every time we hit the exception now, we're actually hitting that fallback method and we're putting some default information back in there, right?
And one thing you'll notice here, I have an ID for Grace because she's in the database, and Ethan is not in the one. Our default one that I'm returning is not in the database. Right. So if you look in here, this is the Panache entity. It gets by default, it gets a database ID, right? So this is how we know we are falling back. Of course, we can also look at our logs and see that we are occasionally getting an error, right?
So what happens if we keep we have multiple customers hitting this site many times, and we're really making the system kind of go crazy here. So can we do a circuit breaker instead of a fallback?
We can do a circuit breaker. Yep.
Yeah.
And actually, before we leave the fallback topic, one thing I like to talk about fallbacks, because this was something I read a long time ago about Netflix, and I thought it was just a really great example about working with your business. So one of the things when when Amazon first got into the streaming business, right, when you would go, because they were going to compete with Netflix, right? So they said one of the discussions they had was, what happens if we can't charge your credit card? So I go in and I search on the TV, I go to Amazon Prime and I click a movie, I rent this movie, but something goes wrong with my credit card. And they said the default for that was to approve it, because they thought initially they would lose the royalties they had to pay. They would just eat the cost of that because it was worth it to try and capture the audience. And if people had a negative experience, they wouldn't use the service again. They would just give up. They wouldn't bother trying Prime again. They would stick with Netflix, right? And so it gives you an idea that fallback methods like this give you a way to really react with your business. Like, when I have errors, what is the behavior that you guys would like to see, right? I mean, we're just returning Ethan Hunt, right? Because he's our default guy. But if this is a recommendation engine or whatever, you can talk to your business and say, what is the fallback method, right? All right. So our little soapbox about aligning with the business is all.
You never told me that story before. So
good story.
Yeah, that really is. So now if we have a circuit breaker, this isn't necessarily the same as a circuit breaker like when you're in Kubernetes. But in this case, what we want to do is we want to say, let's set a request threshold first.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
What do you want to say?
No, don't. Yeah, take out the fail on. Sorry. So the request threshold is, we're going to set that to 4 because I think that jives with Jeremy's code there. So what this means is that after, we hit an exception or some kind of issue here, we're going to fall within, every 4 kind of thing. And then we want a failure ratio. So do comma failure ratio after that. So let's do, I don't know, 0.5 or something. So once we hit the threshold and we hit the error, if we hit another error, like 50% in this case, within the delay time period, the circuit breaker has been tripped. And if we hit the ratio within that trip period, then we're going to actually fail out of here.
So let's take a look at what this will look like. And we tripped the circuit breaker, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we got to trip the circuit breaker.
We haven't tripped it yet, have we?
No.
Look, it's tripped now, right?
Now it's tripped. All right. Now,
we
want to trip the circuit breaker if this is really, we're hammering the website and we want to just stop the traffic going there because, we're getting inundated by somebody with this.
Oops. So now we should not see anything saying returning a random 8.
Mm-hmm. Now we could put a custom exception in here to deal with that. So we can hit the logging later on. But right now we know that we want to stop this traffic because it's really doing damage to the website.
I haven't been able to trick it. Okay, now it's tripped.
Yeah.
Circuit breaker open exception, right?
Yeah.
So we're getting a different exception, right? And we know, and we would be able to handle that inside our code. Again, I wouldn't use this in terms of inline code. I would use this when I'm calling some kind of external service, right? To make more sense to do that. But that's how you use a circuit breaker. Should have wired this up to call an external service. We'll do that. We'll do that when I committed to
Yeah,
GitHub.
but we can't, we couldn't find an actual Tom Cruise API anywhere. So if anybody wants to take that on.
I did briefly look for Mission Impossible in particular, but also Tom Cruise APIs. I didn't find any of those, any free Tom Cruise or Mission Impossible APIs.
So let's look now. We want to add the logging part. So what we did, we looked at the health. We looked at, the tracing kind of capability. We looked at the fault tolerance. Right. So the next thing we want to do is, how can we actually look at those logs so that if we correlate that tracing information, can we correlate that exception information?
Look at it. Micrometer?
Yeah. Why don't we do that?
All right. And Prometheus?
Yeah. If you add the extension for Micrometer -registry -Prometheus, I think we'll add the functionality that we're looking for.
Yeah. Micrometer -registry -Prometheus. All right, we've added an extension here. Let's.
So now the next step, before you add any code, let's go in and look at the properties file real quick, because we need to enable a couple things in properties.
Yep, and then hang on, I just need to make sure that I wish I don't have a keyboard shortcut for this. Sorry. Application properties.
Okay, so there's some default things in here, but we're going to enable a bunch of things just so that we can show you different kinds of paths that we can get to see some of these metrics.
Yep. All right. So let's come back here and we'll say fire Quarkus back up now. We'll see if we see a Micrometer plugin executing here. And we've got, let me see it here. Yep, right there, Micrometer. So let's come check. Let's check this out. Do a couple of these. Actually, let's just do quotes random.
I'm going to take the circuit breaker out of there. That might help too.
Yeah, we'll just do different URLs. The reason we have 3 URLs is because we have 3 different examples to deal with, right? So this is our best quotes from the movies. If you're dealing with someone who's crushed, stabbed, shot, and detonated 5 members of his own IMF team, how devastated do you think you're going to make him by marching me, and Uncle Donald down to the county courthouse? Right? So that's a nice quote. Let's take a look at our dev UI here. Oops. And let's go to our extensions and Micrometer metrics, right? Prometheus. Yep. So what is this? Bunch of stuff, right?
Holy cow. So now we're actually pushing stuff out to Prometheus, which is pretty cool because we didn't really do much except add the extension in there and enable some properties, right?
And we're getting, a whole bunch of, JVM, can't see your memory use, JVM threads, right?
Yep.
All right. So we can also look at this in JSON if we want to look at JSON.
Yeah, let's go to localhost 9000 Q metrics JSON. Is that, you already got it up and running? Yep. Oh, that's another way to look at it. Yep. Oh. Just /JSON. No, Q metrics /JSON. Q.
Oh, you mean regular local? Sorry, localhost 8080 Q.
Metrics /JSON. Uh-oh.
Oh, okay, demo gods.
There we go.
All right, anyway. So this is what it looks like in JSON.
Oh, was it 9,000? It's 9,000. Did you have 9,000 in there? I can't see. $9,000. Yeah,
there we go.
All right. So that gives us a little different view. And why that's important is because if you have different kinds of collectors on the back end.
And there's the raw Prometheus one, right?
Right. So if you have different kinds of collectors on the back end, you might have some third-party stuff that's collecting this. We can put it, put this information out in different formats.
All right.
So another format would be you did localhost 9000 cube metrics, and instead of JSON, just do Prometheus.
Yep. So two different.
Yep. So there's the Prometheus endpoint itself. There's your dev UI where you can see that Prometheus output. You can see it in JSON. And when you get the JSON page, you must be using Chrome. Are you using Chrome?
Yes.
Yeah, because when I get it in Firefox, I can see a really nice JSON output that's formatted.
The JSON output's okay. It's just
that. Yeah, you see the numbers on the right-hand side there? It's all nicely formatted, and I can, actually save it as a file right from the UI when I do it in Firefox. Not that I have anything against Google, but yeah, there you go. Looks a little different there in a different browser, right?
Yep.
I tend to use Firefox more when I'm developing.
All right. Let's we can do some more stuff though too, right? So we can get some better.
So some other things we might want to figure out, how long did that take, from a timing perspective. So we can add really easily @timed. And you can put a value in there that's just, you can put @timed with nothing, or you can put a value in there for like the class name dot the method. So value equals, yep.
We will call it some random quotes here. Right now, that's a few random quotes. Oops, what happened there?
Yeah.
Why do we have nothing? We have nothing.
There you go.
All right, let's bounce. Maybe the annotation I need to reload. The class isn't getting reloaded there, so. Or let's see what's up with that. We'll bounce Quarkus, see what happens here.
Yeah, if all else fails, turn it off and on again, right? Yeah.
All right, there we go. And so what we're looking for, we were saying quotes resource.
Did you find it?
Nope.
Always happens during the demo. See how easy this is?
Random quote? No.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Well, there's really only one other annotation that I can think of that we can put on there, which is counted. And that's really
Here.
Yep. And we can put no, actually we can put a
oh, you know what this might be? Quotes underscore resource. Oh.
For counted, if you put the value equals time now.
Yeah.
Time.now. There might be something going on with our collector too.
All right, now let's try this. See if we bounce it. All right. All right, there we got time. Why is my collector not?
Yeah. Okay. Some things that we could do internally, we could, there's another thing called a gauge. We don't have to go into that right now, but That's just going to allow us to actually use the registry directly and actually set a gauge from a timing directly into it. So there's a bunch of other things, from a deep dive perspective. We could go into any of those in a subsequent session. But for today, what we really wanted to show you was, Microprofile, the ability to pretty simply and easily add some health checks, some tracing kind of capability, the ability to add some fault tolerance to our applications, and then if we had our collector working right, demonstrate some metrics. So logging, metrics, and tracing, those are the three things that we wanted to look at. Why would we do that? We kind of discussed that a little bit. And what's next, Jeremy? What do you think we're going to talk about, next time here?
I don't know what we have next time. So do we have any questions to start with?
I don't see anything in the chat right now. But next time, I think next time when we get together, we want to do a from scratch coding, maybe on WebAssembly, because we've had quite a few people ask about what WebAssembly is. And instead of, just putting up some slides and talking about it that way, we thought we'd write something from scratch. What do you think of that? Maybe in August.
Yeah. WebAssembly sounds good to me.
Yeah. And what the advantages are. Why it's different from the JVM, right? All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. If you have any other questions or anything, I think our contact information, you should be able to find us pretty easily. If you want to make fun of us for having the demo break, you can do that too. So next time, we're going to talk about some WebAssembly. And if you want to see more detail on the telemetry stuff, or you want to go into like a deep dive on how to create spans and do some sampling and stuff like that, we'd be happy to put something together for that too, and go into a deep dive detail on that. All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Have a good afternoon.